Part of today's session, as I said, we are going to discuss about shortcuts with Microsoft Fabric. And before we jump on to shortcuts, given this is the first session, so I want to quickly introduce about Microsoft Fabric, what it is all about, why there is a huge buzz around Microsoft Fabric, what is OneLake within Microsoft Fabric, and then we will get into learning about what shortcuts are, the different type of shortcuts that you can create, and some aspects of shortcuts, like, okay, how do you actually create the shortcuts and access them, like both from a user interface perspective, graphical user interface perspective, or if I want to create shortcuts programmatically, how do I go about doing that using the REST-based API. We also look at like some of the aspects of shortcuts, like around how do I do caching of the shortcuts, and how do I implement security with shortcuts, basically like access control, and what are the limitations of the shortcuts. When we talk about things, like we also need to talk about the limitations that are associated with that. So we will look into it, and then finally, like we will also I will have share some references, like where you can go and read more about shortcuts. And finally, we'll wrap up the session with some questions from your end. So quick introduction about Microsoft Fabric. So Fabric is an end-to-end analytics platform that was introduced by Microsoft. And I think pretty much if you have been using Power BI, you would have seen the Power BI portal slowly translated into Fabric portal. So Microsoft Fabric, it is a one-stop shop, so for data professionals. So if you are whether a citizen developer or a professional data professional, doesn't matter, because Fabric includes everything that you need in order to perform your activities efficiently. So if you look at the slide, you can see Fabric components, like the data factory for doing any data integration stuff. So if you want to move data from different data sources, then you can utilize the data factory in there. Then you have the Synapse components, like the Synapse data engineering, the Synapse data warehouse, and Synapse data science. So a lot of people think about like, okay, I've been using Microsoft Synapse Analytics, like what happens to the knowledge that I have gained. As you can see here, some of the Synapse components are encompassed in Fabric. So you will be able to use your knowledge around that in here. So when we talk about data engineering, here as a data engineer, you will be able to do things like around how do we move the data and stuff. Either you can use the graphical user interface using Data Factory, or you can write your things in Python using notebooks, and you can do that transformation. Data warehouse, of course, everyone knows, like the star schemas, like you want to have the data in a structured format for reporting and analytics, you can utilize it. And in Kim's like a keynote, she talked a lot about AI and especially around Copilot. So we have got Copilot within Microsoft Fabric too. So for people who are new to Copilot, Copilot is basically Microsoft's AI chatbot, and Microsoft are implementing Copilot in most of their flagship products. So whether you take M365, D365, Windows 11, even Azure has got Copilot. We also have Copilot with Fabric in here. So Copilot, as you know, like you can type natural language text, and you can ask the tool to do what you are asking for. So I can go and use the Copilot in Fabric to create reports and so on. Of course, there are other sessions in today where you can learn about some of these other components that we are discussing here. Then the Synapse real-time intelligence, which was also, if you're dealing with real-time data, this is a great component to work with, because you will be able to capture the real-time data as well as build analytics over that. Power BI, as you all know, the great data analytics tool that we have got now, it is part of the Microsoft Fabric. And of course, like data activator. So this is also part of Fabric now. So if you want to get any alerts around anomalies of information and stuff, you'll be able to get that through data activator. So what is this all about Microsoft Fabric? One of the key thing about Fabric is all about, it is a SaaS platform. So basically, like you pay for what you are consuming. So you assign Fabric capacity. Capacity is nothing but like the resources that you require to utilize these components, and you will be paying for only what you are using. And the great thing is about is like you can start small, and gradually as you use more components, then you can keep on increasing your capacity. uh, if you are not sure about like, okay, how do I get started with fabric, and I think there was a useful resources which Kim posted in the keynote. But also, like, I wanted to highlight about the fabric trial version. So if you want to try your or do hands-on with fabric, you have a 60-day trial version that is available, and it comes up with the F64 capacity. So whatever I'm going to teach you today about shortcuts, if you want to go ahead and practice that, of course, you have a 60-day trial version that you can subscribe to and you can utilize it. So without waiting for any further, so let us jump on to understanding what is OneLake. So as you can see here, I didn't talk much about OneLake because OneLake is one of the key component within Microsoft Fabric. So Fabric is actually built based on a lake-centric architecture. So if you think about data professionals, one of the key problem that they have got is not having all the data in one place. And typically, like this results in a lot of data duplication and not having a single source of the truth, which is becoming more and more a pain point for organizations, because there is no single copy of the data source that they can look at, right? So which means like you may have different versions of the data sitting in different places, reports being built on them, and there is no confidence, resulting in no confidence on the reports themselves. So if you think about OneLake, it is actually built on the open platform. So what it really means is like with OneLake, you will be able to have all the data of your organization stored in one place. So it is actually talking about having a single copy of your data. So think about like OneDrive. So how you have OneDrive for all your organization files. Similarly, OneLake is the same concept, but it is all for your data. So if you want to have a single point of contact for all your data, then OneLake is your way to go in Microsoft Fabric. And as you can see here, OneLake is the platform that where your data will be sitting in and made available for all of these components to use. And this is pretty cool because whether you are going to do data warehousing, or whether you are going to do data engineering, or whether you are going to do like reporting and analytics, all these require data. And now all this data is going to come from the OneLake storage, which is your single copy of your organization data. So this is the important power of Microsoft Fabric. And this particular OneLake is built on Azure Data Lake Storage. And as you can see here, with Azure Data Lake Storage, you can store data in the format of like you can have it in Parquet files or CSV files, the JSON files, or any other format as you can think. And these will be available for the consumption from any of the components that are listed here as part of Microsoft Fabric. So OneLake is basically the fundamental architecture change that Microsoft have made with Microsoft Fabric, and one of the key architectural information that you need to know about. And if you ask me, one of the key difference between what is with Synapse versus Fabric is the OneLake architecture. And because here it is all about having a single copy of the data that can be shared across the different components. Then what is really shortcuts is all about? So we talked about Fabric, the components of Fabric, and we talked about OneLake, why OneLake is really an important architectural pattern that we need to know with Fabric. Shortcuts are the next level, like with having all the data in one place, which is all great, and that's what Microsoft, like the OneLake within Fabric, allows us to do. But what is the other thing that which has been a pain point is the need for movement of the data. So I may have a data sitting already in my data lake storage Gen 2 account. Okay, so I have a Gen 2 account. I may have data sitting already in there. And then if I have to bring that into Microsoft Fabric, the usual ways, like if you have to bring it to a data warehouse platform, what do? I do a typical ETL process. So where I have to do the data movement. So take the data from Gen 2, put it into Fabric, and then expose it to whatever components that want to utilize it. But this is where Microsoft introduced the concept of shortcuts. So shortcuts are nothing but like you will be able to just create like a, how you create like a shortcut in Windows, right? So where I have a file sitting in some location, and actually I'll be creating a shortcut of that file on my desktop. And even today when I'm talking here, I have a shortcut of this presentation or sitting on my desktop. So the same concept they have implemented in Fabric. You have your data sitting in ADLS Gen 2, fine. You can create what we call it a shortcut within Microsoft Fabric, where it allows you to create, it is like a virtual object. So the object will be created, the data will be still available in the ADLS Gen 2. There is no duplication of the data. You can still access the data through the shortcuts where the data is still available in the original location itself. So typically how you have got your shortcuts on your desktop, similar, the same concept in here. So think about shortcuts as your like symbolic links, where it is actually a link, but the original data is sitting in the location where it is already available. So only prerequisites, as you can see here, you can create shortcuts in here, as you can see in the slides, like here you have the Lakehouse Explorer. So you need to create a Lakehouse, and where you can create shortcuts of the data that is sitting under the files or even under the tables. And the shortcuts, you can create them, and the shortcuts can come from any of the data sources, which we will be talking shortly about. Either you can create a shortcut of an internal Fabric Lakehouse, or you can bring shortcuts from external data. So we will look at both the combinations. So given we learned what a shortcut is all about, let us go ahead and create a one lake shortcut. So I'm going to quickly jump on to my Microsoft Fabric account. So let me quickly jump on here. Well, it's nice to increase the resolution. Hope you can see. Great. So what we are seeing here is I have created a workspace called Data Toboggan 2024, and if I want to create a shortcut, the prerequisite for me here, because I'm going to create a one lake shortcut, I need to have a lake house. I've already created a lake house and made it available. So I have got a demo lake house that is available and already got some data imported in here. So let me quickly show you how I have built this. So if you can see here, like when you create a normal lake house, you can go ahead and you can upload any data that you require. The upload process is quite simple. If you want to upload files, you can go ahead and just click on upload files, and you can choose any file from your file system. So I had a file called sales.csv, and I created the file, and I have loaded the file in here as a CSV file. So as you can see, it will be getting loaded. So nothing but a simple CSV file I have loaded in here. So suppose if you have a data like this sitting in your Lakehouse and you want to expose this data for someone to utilize it, you can create a shortcut of this sales data. So you can just go here and say, I want to create a new shortcut. And as you can see here, as part of creating the new shortcut, you have quite a few options. We will discuss about these options in the subsequent slides. The first option you have got is like, okay, do you want to create a shortcut of the data that is already available as part of your Fabric One Lake? I can go ahead and select this option. And I have to choose my Lakehouse, which has got the data that I want to create a shortcut for. Here I will be using my Data Toboggan one, and I have under files, I can go ahead and I have a folder called sales. This is where I had my file. I can go here and say like, okay, I want to create a sales shortcut. As you can see, this will be created in here, and I can go ahead and click on create. So now, as you can see, a shortcut of sales has been created. So this is under the sales folder itself. So this is for the first and quicker way how you can create shortcuts. The other option you can also do for creating shortcuts is when you want to just load this file, you can also take the file and load it into table. So you can just say, I want to load this file into a new table or into existing tables. I have already created a sales table by taking the CSV file and loading it in here. So as you can see, the list of columns and everything that are available. So in OneLake option, like when you create shortcuts, it is not only for files that you have got in your OneLake, but also the tables that you have got in your Lakehouse, you can create shortcuts of them. So I can go ahead and, so you may wondering why should I have these shortcuts? Like because you can use it in other components and stuff, so you don't need to move your data because as long as the data is available as a shortcut, pretty much you can utilize it. So I can go here and I can create a new shortcut. So this is again, I'm going to create a shortcut of my table. So here I have the option and it says like, okay, I want to create a shortcut of the sales table and go ahead and I can go and create that. Cool. So note down that attachment symbol here that clearly shows like that is your shortcut. And the cool thing is whenever you create the shortcut, right, it will be created or the data will be processed in the region where the original data source is available. So if my data source is based in Australia East, the shortcut will be processing the data in Australia East because data sovereignty is really important for organizations to consider. So you don't need to worry about, okay, if I create a shortcut where the data will be processed, because it's not copying the data, right? It has to serve the data, but that processing thing where it is going to happen to pull the data and stuff, that is going to happen in the same region as where you have the original data. So that was a quick simple example just to showcase if your data is already available in a lakehouse in Microsoft Fabric, how you can go ahead and create shortcuts and you can share things. So what are the different things that you can, where you can create the shortcuts? Of course, I said like you can create shortcuts in lake houses and also like you can create shortcuts in KQL databases, which is nothing but your custom query language databases. And there are other places like where you can also where your shortcuts can point to, because we just saw the Lakehouse and KQL, right? So you can also point to your ADLS Gen 2. So if you have a storage account that is available, which has got already the data, you don't need to bring the data into Fabric or expose it via the OneLake in Fabric. You don't need to bring the data into uh, or duplicate the data. You can go ahead and create shortcuts in the Lakehouse, and then you can just expose that data. So your data will be still sitting in ADLS Gen 2 only. Same thing, you can do that with other cloud data sources, like whether we are talking here about Amazon S3 or whether we are talking here about like a Google, you can bring Google storage, it doesn't matter. So you can bring those, create shortcuts pointing to those data sources. And last but not the least, including the data warehouse, Dataverse also. So if you have a Dataverse database, you can have a shortcut pointing to a Dataverse database and get that data exposed in Microsoft Fabric. Similar to how you can point, what are the where you can point for your shortcuts. Similarly, like what are the like components that can access shortcuts. You can access your shortcuts via Apache Spark. You can query them via Apache Spark. You can query them via SQL. You can use it within the real-time intelligence component analysis services, and also in non-Fabric environments. Also, you should be able to use these shortcuts. There are some shortcut types that I wanted to talk to you about. So we saw an example where we used shortcuts in ADLS Gen 2. So ADLS, oh sorry, OneLake. I think we saw the OneLake one. We are going to see the ADLS Gen 2 shortcut shortly. In OneLake, it was typically like we just pointed the file or a table and said like I need to create a shortcut of that. Pretty straightforward. You do that within the Fabric interface. Suppose think about a situation where a lot of organizations, they have got storage accounts where they have got wealth of data already sitting in there. And when they get like a Fabric account created, the next thing they want to do is to get that data and access them through Fabric. So you don't need to go to these organizations and say, come on, let us do a ETL of your data inside Fabric. Instead, you can go ahead and create the shortcuts pointing to these data sources, and immediately the data will be available for you to consume. So you can use it in, as I said, point it to a ADLS Gen 2, or you can use it with Amazon S3 or S3 compatible resources or Google storage, cloud storage shortcuts. You can also create shortcuts or pointing to Dataverse. And last but not the least, one of the key thing that was pointed as part of the keynote is using on-premises data sources. So as long as you have a S3 compatible data store available on premises, you'll be able to create shortcuts pointing to those on-premises data sources. It was quite interesting because last year a lot of people were so fascinated and asking questions saying the shortcuts is so good, but how do we use it from an on-premises context? And that's what announced as part of the build conference. So now you have the ability to create shortcuts pointing to your S3 compatible data sources on premises. And it is going to utilize a gateway, and through that gateway the data can be securely served inside Microsoft Fabric. So pretty cool, right? So even if you have an on-premises data source, you don't need to again do a typical ETL process. You will be able to access your data straight inside your Microsoft Fabric with the help of these shortcuts. And keep in mind that is currently in preview. Cool. So let us quickly look at how do we create a ADLS Gen 2 shortcut. So we won't be able to do all the demos for all the different types of shortcuts, but I will share the references where you can practice it with using your free trial that I talked about. So with Gen 2, what I have done is I have created ADLS Gen 2 account. So for people who are not sure about how do you create, when you go and create a new resource for ADLS Gen 2, um, normally you can't find it as a ADLS Gen 2 resource. You have to go and look for what we call it as a storage account. And you may be wondering like, okay, if I go and create a storage account, isn't it creating a blob storage? Yes, there are by default, it will be creating a blob storage. But if you go and look at this advanced option, there is an option here which is to turn on hierarchical namespace. So if you turn on this option, basically your storage account is actually a ADLS Gen 2 account. So that is the fundamental difference. So if by default, if you didn't select this, actually you are creating a blob storage, not a ADLS Gen 2 account. So just keep in mind to enable this so that it is a ADLS Gen 2. Accidentally, if you created a storage account, you forgot about this option, always you have an option to upgrade it to a ADLS Gen 2, right? So that option is also available. I think it is one way, not the other way. So you can upgrade a blob to ADLS Gen 2, but not the ADLS downgrade from ADLS Gen 2 to blob. Cool. So now we don't need to do that, but just I wanted to quickly show you the tip of how you create a ADLS Gen 2 account. So I have got an ADLS Gen 2 account already, and I have got a container here called sales data, the same sales.csv file which I used in my demo. I uploaded the file in my container here. So now assume like you have got a whole heap of files sitting in your ADLS Gen 2 account and sitting there, and you want to expose this data inside your Fabric environment. So how do you go about doing that? Exactly in the same way. So you get into your Lakehouse, and then what you do is like you go ahead and create a new shortcut. And as you can see here, when you are creating a new shortcut, you have the ability here for choosing the different data sources. So here I have got Amazon S3 or Amazon S3 compatible one, ADLS Gen 2, Dataverse, and as you can see here, the Google Cloud Storage is currently in preview. So now if I go ahead and use the Data Lake Storage Gen 2, and keep in mind, mine is a trial version, right? So that's the reason it is located in Southeast Asia. And also like I made sure like if you are going to use your Lakehouse is in here, then the shortcut will be also processed in the same region. So this is just to give you that comfort of the data sovereignty. Now you need to point to the connection string for your data lake storage Gen 2. So how do you normally find your connection string? So you go into your is stuff here, and if you go under configuration, and so I think it is not under endpoint, sorry. If you go under the endpoints under settings, you can see here your primary endpoint for your data lake storage. Some people just get confused because when they use the connection string, make sure that you use the one which has got the DFS endpoint. So if you don't use the DFS endpoint, you may get access denied issues or access related issues. So make sure you copy this URL, and that's what you'll be putting in here. And then you create a new connection, and you can just decide on. So let me put this. I have already created it, but I can just quickly show you just to save some time. So as you can see here, now you can sign in. And if you want to just sign in with your Azure account, or if you want to, there are many mechanisms how you can sign in. So if I click on edit connection, you can sign in with your account key, organization account, SaaS signature, or even service principal. So in any of this mechanism, you will be able to connect your ADLS Gen 2 and create the shortcut. So I have gone through, maybe I think it would be good. Let us go through further. Let me create a new shortcut, because I wanted just to quickly show you something in here in the next step. So this is now going to query my Gen 2, and then here I have got, okay, I want to bring in the stuff within sitting in my sales data container. I can go ahead and say next, and then this is going to go ahead and create the shortcut. So if you have more containers sitting in here, then probably you will be able to just to pull through the stuff what you is sitting in the containers, and you can get the data. And also you will be able to get to see what are the different files that are available in here for which you want to create the shortcut. Once that is done, I will have a shortcut created like this. And as you can see here, this is the shortcut created for my sales data. And this sales data is actually pointing to my container here. So I can go ahead and query the stuff that is available in here, which is my sales file. So now I haven't done any of a typical ETL process or anything. All the data that I have got in my container, which is within my ADLS Gen 2, is now available for me within Fabric to go ahead and start querying and utilizing it. So straightforward, really simple. Avoid data duplication, single source of the truth, make it available for all the components within Microsoft Fabric to consume. Shortcuts is your way to go. And as I said, there are different mechanisms, like you can bring in data sitting in different clouds, like AWS or even Google, or even on premises, or even in your own Azure cloud in Data Lake Storage Gen 2, or it can be in sitting in Dataverse in Power Platform. You don't need to physically move the data. You can just create virtual pointers like shortcuts, where the data can still sit in your original locations wherever it is, or store or your original storage environment, and you will be able to access the data using Microsoft Fabric. So similarly, there are examples where you can go ahead and create a trial AWS S3 bucket account, and you can load the data in there, create shortcuts using Fabric, as well as the same thing that you can do with the Google account also. Cool. So there is another option called as caching in shortcuts. So caching is a mechanism where you can use to reduce your egress cost. So for instance, like especially if you are dealing with cross cloud data access, right? So because you are reading the files through an external shortcut, where the files are actually they're sitting inside your storage, like your source storage account. So for instance, in my case, if it is in AWS, it will be sitting in AWS. So every time I need to access the file, I don't want to spend money on egress costs. So how do I save the cost when it comes to Azure? This is always the interesting part I like about cloud, right? So when we start designing solutions, it is not about just designing the solutions. We need to also start thinking about the cost optimization techniques. So yes, it's all good. Shortcuts is all good because I can just serve the data whenever I like. But every time when you access the data, keep in mind egress cost will be there. So how do you prevent the egress cost, especially with other cloud scenarios? And that's where the caching comes into play. So you can actually turn on the cache, and this is where at the workspace level in OneLake, you can just say, I want to enable the cache on the shortcuts. So which means like you by default, like the retention period is like you have a retention period of up to 24 hours. So each time when the file is accessed, the retention period will be reset, and it is going to be kept in there for 24 hours. So which means like if the file hasn't been accessed for more than 24 hours, it will be removed it from the cache. So keep that in mind. So in this way, like you will save on your egress cost, so that you can just subsequent, once it is in cache, the subsequent request will be served from the cache rather than from the like your external providers. And also there is something around like if you have files that are more than 1 GB, so if you have files that are sitting of more than 1 GB size, then they are not going to be cached. And again, shortcut caching is now supported with the S3 storage, as well as S3 compatible storage accounts, and your Google Cloud Storage. So the other ones, like you need to watch the space as the things are evolving, shortcuts will be enabled for them. And keep in mind, by default, you need to go ahead, it is not enabled to automatically turned on. You need to go and enable that as part of your workspace settings. Cool. So we looked at what shortcuts are, how do we go about creating shortcuts, and how do we like use the access the shortcuts using the portal. And also, like we looked at the mechanisms, like what are the different data sources that you can point to create shortcuts. Shortcut security, who can access, because pretty much you are creating a shortcut of your data, right? When it comes to giving access to your data, security is really important. So now you will be able to set permissions for your shortcuts also. It's not only about the data, but who can access the shortcuts. So as you know, shortcuts are like pointers, whether your data is sitting in OneLake or other cloud systems, doesn't matter. So you can go ahead and set the permission. So this is going to be basically like you can set the permission on the shortcut path, which is basically where the shortcut is getting created within Fabric, and also the permission on the target path, which is the location where the shortcut is pointing to. So you may have a shortcut, but if you don't have the permissions to look at the data in there, you won't be able to see that. So there are different set of permissions that you can set up, like you can set read all permissions, you can provide write permissions to the shortcut target location, or you can also get read data from the shortcuts via a TDS endpoint. So you have different permissions that you can set as part of your shortcut security. So keep that in mind. If you are concerned about whether I can protect my data, especially with the when it is exposed via the shortcuts, you can. And also, like with Fabric, they also provide the what is that, role-based access control. So role-based access control is also available in order to protect your shortcuts. So you will be able to utilize your role-based access control. If you already got predefined roles set in Fabric, you can utilize that too in order to secure your shortcuts. So we saw shortcuts in terms of how do we go about and use the shortcuts in terms of your user interface within Microsoft Fabric. But another thing that is also pretty cool is around how do you access the shortcuts or create the shortcuts programmatically. So keep that in mind. The REST API that is available for shortcuts within Microsoft Fabric, again, it's in preview. It provides you 3 operations that you can perform. One is you can create shortcuts. Then you can delete the shortcuts, and as well as you can go ahead and get the list of shortcuts that are available. So as you can see here, to create a shortcut, you specify this is the endpoint, the workspace under which you want to create the shortcut, the item that needs to be created the shortcut for, and then under which you will create the shortcut. And finally, the shortcut conflict policy. So the conflict policy basically tells you, like saying, okay, so if I have a shortcut already available, what should I do? By default, the policy is abort, which means like don't create the shortcut if it already exists. But what you can also do is like you can go ahead and you can provide a different option, which is if the name shortcut name already exists, you go and create it with a unique name. So it is going to create a new unique short name for your shortcut if this particular policy is set to generate unique name. So by default, it is going to abort. It will cancel the shortcut creation, especially if a name already exists for that shortcut in the workspace. So that's the create option. And so as part of this, you can also specify for which particular data source, like what is the target data source that you are pointing to as part of the shortcut. So for instance, like you can have ADLS Gen 2. So these are some things that you will be pointing to. So as part of sending the information. So if you want to just say like, okay, I'm going to say this is my path, this is my like this is going to be my target. My target is basically is going to be either ADLS Gen 2 or is it Amazon S3 or it is going to be Dataverse, and then you will create the shortcut. The next operation you have got is the delete operation. With the delete operation, it's the same thing. So you can point it which particular shortcut that you want to delete, and it is going to provide the same things that we discussed in here. Like you will be able to go ahead and delete the particular shortcut. And the last one is around getting the shortcut. So you can go ahead and get a list of all the shortcuts that you require, and you can just specifically say the shortcut path and the shortcut name, and then you will get that particular shortcut. Or you can just say like, okay, I want to get all the shortcuts within one particular path. You will be able to get that too. So you will this is one of the cool thing around so this is basically get shortcut. Get all is not currently available, but I think you will be able to just say like, okay, I want to get a particular shortcut information. You will be able to go ahead and get that. But again, as I said, this is just a preview, right? So there will be more operations that will be added in order to programmatically work with shortcuts. Because as you can see, sometimes like it would be great when you create a new container or when you create something on your data sources, nice to programmatically create the shortcuts in Fabric and make it available so that you don't need to worry about that saying like, oh, okay, so or otherwise, oh, did you create a container? Did you load these files? Can I get that exposed in Microsoft Fabric? That's where the REST APIs are going to be really handy so that you can programmatically, as and when you're creating new containers or loading files, you can make sure whether these containers are exposed as shortcuts in Fabric. If not, you can programmatically do them. So anything that we do, we always need to look at like, okay, what are the limitations that we have got in that space? So some of the limitations when it comes to shortcuts within Microsoft Fabric is the maximum number of shortcuts for a per Fabric item is going to be 100,000. That's what you can create. And then you can have the number of shortcuts in a single one lake path is up to 10. And the number of direct shortcuts to shortcut links is up to 5 that you can create. And some few other things like you have to keep in mind is around the not you can't use the reserved characters in the target path. You can't have like a percentage or plus characters in the shortcut names or parent paths and target paths, which normally we don't have, but I think it is worthwhile to just keep that in mind. And also lineage for shortcuts to data warehouse and semantic models, they are not currently available. So you'll be able to just to get to see in your lake houses like, okay, these shortcuts pointing to which data sources. But when it comes to like data warehouses and semantic models, the lineage is not turned on yet to showcase like, okay, they are coming from shortcuts. So that is something to keep in mind and also watch that space. So as Kim mentioned in the keynote, there is a Fabric roadmap and always like there are new features getting added. So that's one way of keeping yourself up to date around what new features that are coming, especially in the context of shortcuts in Microsoft Fabric. Cool. So all the things that we have been discussing in terms of like how do I use the shortcuts, what shortcuts are, how do I use it in one lake, how do I use that with data lake storage Gen 2, or how do I create shortcuts with on-premises data. So as I said, it is S3 compatible data source, then you can create shortcuts using the gateway that is available, and you will be able to just point to that data source and you can have shortcuts available on Microsoft Fabric. So key point which before I wrap up the session is the shortcuts are easier way to avoid the duplication of your data coming like from your data source to Fabric. So if you have the ability to do that, create Fabric and you create the shortcuts in Fabric and utilize it. I would definitely recommend you to do that. Don't forget the caching part, because I think your egress cost is something that you have to keep in mind, because you won't have control around how often people are utilizing it. The retention period that you can alter and set, and it is currently like around default around 24 hours, how it will be, how long it will be cached for. And keep that in mind. That is one way how you can reduce your cost or try and do cost optimization. So if you want to practice shortcuts, just as I said, go ahead and utilize the trial version of Microsoft Fabric. Whatever I showcased in the demo, you will be able to do that just with the trial version. That's why I did the demo completely with my trial version of Microsoft Fabric. And you get a 60-day trial version, and you can practice all the things that I showcased, and also the additional ones, like if you have a AWS account or GCP account, you will be able to go ahead and point to that and create shortcuts within Fabric. So with that note, thanks for attending my session. So hope you would have understood the concepts of shortcuts. What are the things that you can do with shortcuts, and what advantages that you get, what limitations that you have got with like shortcuts in Fabric, and also what's the space around the new features that are coming with shortcuts within Fabric. So I'm happy to take any questions that are there with the participants.